Create Peace at Home is a show dedicated to the voices of social justice movements.
We bring to you guests who are engaged in making a difference in the lives of those who are forgotten.
We are committed to finding solutions which make people safe and communities thrive.
We believe that people have powerful stories about personal transformation.
When shared, these stories begin a process of healing.
In these stories, we connect different issues which speak to the equity for everyone.
I'm your host, Buna Chima. Welcome to Create Peace at Home. Welcome back to Create Peace at Home. In the studio with me today are two amazing women, and you will have an opportunity to hear their stories. This show is about creating equity in all areas of life. Today we will focus on mental health and spirituality, and also the impact of trauma and the tools that can be used to heal us. So welcome, Monique and Amanda. Monique, would you go first and tell us how this passion started in you and how you got to now being the consultant for the state of California on teaching people about mental health and spirituality?
Sure, absolutely. My husband and I have a background in marriage and families. We really have a commitment to not only serve and minister to families, but to encourage families as they go through difficult times. And as we know, throughout any issue, including that of mental health, a lot of individuals who have a reliance on their faith or their spiritual belief or any life philosophy that really is the driving force for the way that they see the world and how they see wellness and how they see recovery and how they see marriage and how they see family. Anytime distress happens, as it is just sort of inevitable in our lives, it's a part of the physical law of being human and a part of our condition, they turn to their spiritual communities first, often. And as spiritual leaders, my husband and I were talking to families, and we found that not only did we have lived experience with mental health, but we were able to see that at the core of some of the issues and some of the stressors in families was coming from mental health issues, whether they were diagnosed or not, and also some from trauma. And as a result, and some incidents that happened that would take way too long to explain, but as divine would have it, I came across some individuals who were working with Alameda County in behavioral health care services and exploring spirituality and mental health really for the first time. So I was used as sort of a cultural broker to sort of bridge that gap or that divide that we saw happening historically between mental health and spirituality. So I've been there to sort of repair that bridge and help build a process and create awareness around where the two really do intersect, and then create opportunities to hold space for both communities.
Amanda, you're part of BOSS's community organizing team.
Correct.
And we have talked about trauma a lot, because I believe that if we're going to be out there in the community organizing, that we need to also be constantly healing ourselves so we can do the work over a lifetime instead of, in bits and pieces. So share with us how you got to Berkeley and what brought you to BOSS, and just anything about your own personal experiences that you feel comfortable with.
Well, I have experienced trauma in my life. How I came to Berkeley was I became unemployed and was faced with a decision to give up my place of residence because I no longer could afford it. The job market became very difficult. Before that happened, I went through a series of traumatic experience, the loss of a parent, the loss of my children, and other things that happened. Someone had told me that BOSS existed. I didn't know it even existed. When I came to BOSS, I was surprised at the way the program actually nurtures you in ways that you wouldn't expect. As a homeless person, I experienced a real radical change in the way people treat you. When I was a working member of the community, everyone seemed to value what I had to say. When I became homeless, I became useless, devalued, and was told no, no, no.
And how quickly that happens.
Yes.
in our, when the community finds out or the family finds out, there's sort of a quick turnaround, and people start to see any one of us that's experiencing
Correct.
the experiences that you have experienced,
Correct.
and start believing that you don't have anything worthy to say anymore because, you're having a breakdown or having a really difficult time putting your life together.
Correct.
So understanding stigma, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Sometimes I've felt that there is that when people are in shelters, that the folks that are living there get it, but the people that are working with the folks that are living in our programs and any programs don't always get it. And it took I'll ask you, Monique, how many years it took to pass Proposition 63 to try to turn our mental health system around and to start seeing people with mental illness as full human beings with an illness. It just happens to be an illness of the mind. So if you would
and
comment
stigma
on
is
that.
stigma is huge. I think that we often have to look at stigma and not in a way where there's just this swooping generalization about what stigma looks like. We also have to take into consideration other factors around stigma. There's internal stigma, there's external stigma, and stigma comes from a lot of different places. What's being taught to us through our families or through larger society, through media, but then also in who we sit next to every day. And so we're finding that in communities, particularly spiritual communities and faith communities, it's really important to educate leaders, the face of those communities, because those are the individuals that are interacting with people every day. And if we can get a transformation in the mind there, then it starts to permeate the entire community to becoming a welcoming place where everybody just sort of needs a soft place to lay. And so when people are going to these communities where they're feeling like this should be my soft place, and then experiencing more trauma because there is not a complete understanding of mental illness or trauma or anything that comes up for individuals, particularly in a way where we can put ourselves in that position and then hold space. It becomes very difficult for the process to be negotiated in a very considerate and thoughtful and humble way, really. It takes a lot of humility to respond to distress in the way that best suits the individual that we're trying to serve.
I think in Alameda County and everywhere else, one of the strengths, but also I believe, not a mistake, but just sort of misguided process, is that like in the old days, developmentally disabled people would always be put with developmentally disabled people. And even though, peers, as the three of us are peers, we've all, have gone through our own experiences. But when we, put 20, 30 folks with very similar experiences, to me, it would be so much richer if that community also had folks that, haven't come from the homeless population or haven't come out of our hospitals, but folks in the community who have a mental illness. And that would be the conversation that I would really like to see happening in Alameda County. And I hope that you will push on that work.
Absolutely. I think you touch on something very important. We talk about the fact that I do some consulting around with organizations who really want to explore spirituality in a really respectful and culturally responsive way. And one of those organizations is Peers, Peers Envisioning and Engaging in Recovery Services. And I consult with them around their social inclusion campaign and what that social inclusion looks like, really. And how do we get all of the diverse voices at the table so that we're really truly learning from each other. So it's not just one community sort of relaying a message to the other, but there's a mutual learning opportunity that happens in a way where we're able to really celebrate our diversity. And that is incredibly important. We've seen that monthly through the spirituality work group. We have a Celebrating Diversity Spotlight. Buna, you've come and spoken with the group and educated the group about certain things around specific spiritual paths and belief systems. And one of the things that I love about that is that every time we come together, we find out that there really are more things that unite us than those things that divide us.
Amanda, you went to one of the presentations that Monique was part of a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk about that a little bit? Tell us what you heard, what you learned.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you. I thought it was fabulous. What I learned was that the spiritual community has a willingness to at least hear and reach out. My experience when I first became homeless, I went to a church and was not received very well. And so it pushed me a little further away from...
It breaks trust.
Yeah, away from where I was hoping to be, because really, I think what would have done it for me was maybe just a hug at that time. And so seeing the community, the spiritual community leaders coming together and actually evaluating themselves as leaders and actually stepping down and out and having that outlet, that that avenue that organizations like Peers is creating, so that they can reach out to the community, and they do understand that, you know, their congregations are fine. It's those outside the congregation that you need to bring into the fold. And it's there that you do the most good, and it's for that purpose that you exist. And so I really thought it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
So I'm going to ask you a very personal question. You're wearing a necklace that has the 10 Commandments on it. So tell us about, you know, what the Christian faith has brought into your life, and, you know, how your faith serves your wellness.
The Christian faith has brought that faith. It's an unending hope that I can endure, and no matter what I go through, I'm never alone. There is God uplifting me always. I may stumble, but I'm not going to fall. So it's that knowledge that keeps me going. And it was that knowledge that actually brought me out of the depressed state I was in. I've been told that, you know, God existed as a Christian, but I never really developed a relationship and never really understood it. When I became homeless, I was forced to realize, hey, you know, it's going to take something outside of me, something greater than me, to get me out of this, because I'm here at this point and I've leaned on my own understanding. I've made decisions for myself, and obviously my knowledge is limited, my understanding is limited. So I had to give that over. And in doing that, I also gave over the shame, the guilt. I learned to, what happened in my past, let it go. And when you have, when you go through trauma, for me, it starts in the mind. My mind would go 100 miles, you know, reminding me of things I've done wrong, mistakes I've made. You know, it's telling me how worthless I was. And then you have people in the community telling you, no. So they're reinforcing all that negativity. But then as a Christian, I'm told, you're worth it. You know, I carried your shame and I nailed it for you. I nailed it to the cross. Let it go. Anything you have, I'm able to take care of it for you.
See, I came to spirituality in a very different path. because of the disruption in my life from a very early age, even though I was born into a Sikh family, and every Sunday, you know, heard the hymns, and you know, had mom and grandmother, and, you know, explaining what the words really meant, reading the holy books. But it took me a while to, I don't know if it was my childhood or my own arrogance as a teenager, but it took me a little while to realize that having a spiritual path and having a spiritual focus, irregardless of, you know, which book or which form of spirituality that we each choose as individuals, but that it's a core piece of our existence. Monique, you want to share something?
I do.
Wonderful, as always.
I just wanted to say during the training, just to give a little context and a little bit of background, I am part of a statewide initiative that seeks to support the spiritual lives of individuals in the mental health system, and then also to explore the role of faith communities and spiritual communities in wellness and recovery. As a result of that, this was really important to me because I sit in a very interesting seat, and I wear a few different hats in that I am a consumer, one with lived experience with mental health myself. I'm a family member, and then I am also a spiritual leader. And so I know what it's like to be going through that difficult time and to have things being reinforced to you that are a product of your thoughts and so on, and trauma, and then go to a community and have that experience that's not so much of a great one. And so this training that I developed that you all took part in was really designed to give spiritual leaders and faith leaders, whether they're pastors, imams, deacons, priests, priestesses, anything, to anyone who's a community identified leader, sort of a guide to how to support individuals through their process and their recovery journey. I think that at the core of all of us, the core of the mental health system, the core of spirituality and faith leaders, is really to see the best in each person and see each person reach their full potential and their great wellness. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to bring real people, real faces, you know, particularly, again, when we talk about stigma, it goes back to misinformation about what mental health is, what mental illness is. And I always like to use the example of arachnophobia. You know, it's a scientific thought that the reason why people are afraid of spiders is because they don't have identifiable features that you can relate to. And so what I wanted to do through that training was bring in experiences where individuals would be able to look another person eye to eye and realize that behind that eye, those eyes are souls, it's intent, it's will, it's intellect, it's emotion, it's all of these wonderful, valid, powerful things, and that there's a heart beating there and there's blood coursing through those veins, much like my own. And so I didn't want to just have a training where I was using celebrities or, you know, talking about all these historical figures who may or may not have had mental health diagnoses, but real people that we can reach out and touch. And you were so great to share with us that day and to sort of give us a challenge, really, that I hope everybody is still warmly meeting, but definitely it was warmly met in the room, to say that sometimes you have to go beyond what you know and beyond the surface of just doing administrative stuff, just doing the work of ministry, the work of serving, but to actually go out and do it person to person, transform somebody's life, reach out and touch somebody. We can't have our hands full so much of activities, list to-dos, that we can't just reach out and connect.
The way society moves and how quickly time moves now, that's what we've dropped the most. That we think it's more important to stay that extra hour in the office than to get home and hug our kids, because everybody's struggling. So people are making choices that are not giving them space to renew and you know, rest. It's the whole issue of sleep deprivation. You know, nobody in a shelter sleeps well. People on the streets don't sleep well. and we don't really want to hear those core stories or what the real experience is, because then that would create pain in us. And we're so afraid of that in this culture. You know, we all want to always think everything's okay or everything will be okay. But I think at some point we really have to open up as a community and say, you know, we're not that different. You just happen to be there now, but there will be many. I was there 40 years ago, and and there will be more people. And I think when we keep dialoguing in sort of silos, that we keep forgetting that really at the bottom of this is the extreme impact of poverty or racism that creates trauma. It's not just that, you know, one day you're okay and the next day you're traumatized. It's the conditions that also create the trauma, and just the pressure that everyone has to live under these days is traumatic itself.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about your family, your kids. Is there reconciliation in the future?
My family, I have a relationship with my family. They have, you know, their family, and pretty much it's not wanting to interfere with their life. But they're there, they're strong support for me outside. But for me, coming into the spiritual part of it, for me, I think if you could imagine learning to swim and being in water for the first time, and someone holding you and telling you it's going to be okay. Let go. You'll float. And learning to depend on that buoyancy, you know, to hold you, and just feeling the comfort of it. To me, that's what it's like.
That's beautiful.
You know, so I think it's the peace of mind that helps you overcome the trauma. Learning to rest, learning that you are going to experience bad things. Bad things will happen to you, but you don't have to go through it alone. And
I think that's a key point, that we don't have to go through it alone. There's three of us sitting here. All three are consumers. All three are also family members, you know, kids that have had problems, and we're sharing our story. And I'm hoping that the more we do, just the storytelling piece, I'm a human being, this is what happened, this is what shattered my soul, and I'm here in this community, in this spiritual community, to get well and to get that support. And I would encourage people in the audience to really check in with us and see if you would like to come and attend any of the meetings that we have. We will post the information at the end of the show, and join us in continuing to grow this movement. Monique, back to you. How old were you when you first knew that you had a purpose that was going to lead in this way of supporting people who are in the healing process?
Wow. You know, I have never not been aware of that. I don't ever recall not being aware that there was purpose for me. I knew that I was very task-oriented, but I also knew that at the core of who I am, my tasks were always about the people who were going to benefit from what I was doing. I think that when I sort of realized that it was going to be more toward mental health is having a conversation with a very dear friend, and just sort of being asked the question if I had ever considered that I was chosen for what I was going through to help others. And I thought about that, and And the very first time that I sort of opened up and just said, you know, this is what I'm struggling with, and this is how I've been able to keep going so far, and have so many people come just in one sharing and say, wow, I can really relate to that. And I think that that has been the driving force behind what I do, is not just, because I think a lot of times something becomes a cause for us once we have that personal experience. But I think knowing that it's not just about those that I know by name, but that there are so many who deserve the same support, the same love, and need to be reminded of the great power they have.
So why do you think we need to remind people that they need to love everybody, regardless of, you know, gender, economics, what a person looks like, what they're wearing, whether they're all struffled up, and if you hug them, you might think you might catch something. Those are the folks who need the most amount of touch and, you know, being able to see themselves as, oh, I am human, because the process of homelessness really dehumanizes people. And folks get lost. And then it's really, really hard to sort of get them to, you know, see that inner authenticity and the inner beauty that each human person has.
I have to say that dehumanizing processes happen because repetition is a great teacher. And I think that on a day-to-day basis, you really don't have to go far. You don't even have to leave your home to be inundated with messages that are stigmatizing and that are untrue. And so one of the things that I do through the training, the Mental Health and Spirituality 101 training for faith leaders, is to replace misinformation, because, and that it's very purposeful that I use that statement, because people are getting information. It's just not the right information all the time. So we want to replace the misinformation about what homelessness really looks like and who those individuals are behind that term, that name. For us, sometimes things just become verbiage, but me being able to make that connection gets lost, you know, as you mentioned. So I think by continuing to replace those messages by the ones that we really want people to receive becomes the key. Shows like this, inviting people to trainings and having open community dialogues, and just really having champions around issues like yourself and like Amanda, that say, you know, hey, there's another way to look at this. Have you considered this part?
Welcome back to Create Peace at Home. My next question is for you, Amanda. You are living at the Ursula Sherman Village, which we created as a community. And a lot of people said to me that, you know, if you're going to put in single men, single women, and families and children all in one place, you're going to have serious problems. And that's, you know, the stereotype stigma of single men near children, there's going to be, you know, danger. And my approach was that, you know, all communities are blended. We don't put seniors, you know, we don't segregate people by gender and age. It's an interesting place to be. You must see a lot.
Yes.
Would you share a couple of stories with us of your experience?
Sure. When I first came to the village, I was welcomed by a wonderful woman. I will refer to her as Julia. She was a big sister to me and showed me around the village, and she was a great inspiration to me. She had overcame drug addiction, went back to school. She just embraces everyone and anyone and helps them, and she truly is a big sister. And I think that she is such a success story to, after not going to school in 20, 30 years, and finished school this semester with A's and B's. I mean, it was a wonderful accomplishment. On the flip side, recently there was a young lady who came in on emergency basis, and another resident had came over, a gentleman came over and asked me if I would go speak to her because she was very distraught and speaking to the possibility of committing suicide. And so I walked over to see what was going on, and she was hysterical, and she said she had been raped and beaten 4 days prior to, and couldn't get into any shelter. She had a knot on the back of her head, and she had made the statement, this is not supposed to happen to white people, which you know, I could have taken negatively, but being that I've in those shoes, you know, where trauma has happened, maybe not the same trauma, I understood that it was that hurt and that traumatic experience that was, you know, trying to make sense of what happened. So my response was just to hug her, not say a word. I hugged her for, you know, a few moments, let her cry, and then I began speaking to her, conscious of my tone of voice, telling her it's going to be okay. You have to hang in there. You know, you're worth every ounce of effort, and we love you even though we don't know you. And I just let her cry it out. And when she released me, then I, you know, took her cue and I let her go, and I looked her in the eyes and I told her, you're going to be okay. And we had called over one of the staff members, who then began speaking to her, and she said, oh, I really don't want to die. I don't know what I was talking about. She just needed that outlet. So you see a lot of that, and that's what motivates me to be of service, because that's where I feel I can do the best myself.
You know, we all, for the last 40 years that at least I've been doing this work, there have been more plans written on ending homelessness. None of them mentions that we also need to love people who are currently in a different situation than we are.
Correct.
Not a single plan.
Correct.
People just think it's all about bricks and mortars and books and computers, but not about loving the community, embracing the community, and then watching how much quicker people heal and start to feel that they belong again. So there are many different initiatives happening in Alameda County. Monique, would you speak to some of those?
Sure. There are several things that I've sort of been involved with in the process leading. We have great opportunities through the Ethnic Services Manager in Alameda County, and looking at disparities in underserved and inappropriately served communities. We have a social inclusion campaign through peers, looking at disparities that we see in the African American community. Some of the ideas and thoughts that are systemic, that happen around individuals who, you know, have that added layer. We can't deny that racism exists, that discrimination exists. So a lot of times when you're talking about the African American community, you exploring stigma and discrimination, but you're really exploring discrimination and then stigma. And so then that becomes an issue within the movement to see individuals truly where they are. So we have ways that we're looking at how we can address those issues and bring better supports so that people are not being inappropriately served, but are being served and met where they are. There is the Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative that's statewide, of which I am the co-chair of that initiative, and I mentioned that. And then also the Social Inclusion Campaign that is also local here to Alameda County. And one of the things that we're doing is looking at communities of color and how spirituality has been a source of comfort and strength. Yeah. And we've been able to utilize those communities as social justice platforms so that we're able to lovingly address, as you so well did with individuals who'll say, hey, this is an issue not just of ethnicity, but then, you know, we have some issues that face people around gender, you know, some gender issues, sexual orientation, all of those sorts of things. And we look at a way to explore those by speaking to people in the language that they're most familiar with, that comes from their culture, which for a lot of individuals, spirituality is definitely a huge part of that. And then as a contractor, you know, I also do the training to faith leaders that you all attended. And I'd also like to say that there is a training that is for providers, so that providers are meeting people where they are.
Because I want to send our leaders to that. I know, I think
Absolutely.
2 have already happened, or?
We had one in, I want to say November, December, but it's available through the Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative at mhspirit.org. That's a training that
Would
Dr.
you say
David
that again?
Sure.
Look at the camera and let's make sure it gets out.
mhspirit.org. And that is the website, that's the official website of the California Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative. You can also view the training that I developed for faith leaders, and they're both available to receive more information or to purchase via the website. And then we just see sort of these things that happen and that are popping up all over the state of California. I facilitate a monthly county liaison call in which people from different counties just get together, and we're able to exchange ideas and to update one another on some of the things that are happening locally in counties. So we really see that mental health and spirituality really has a lot of momentum and a lot of support. And then I've also been contacted by outside of the state, by other mental health departments in other states that are looking to develop something and are sort of in the, you know, implementation stages, and heard about what we're doing in California and thought, that's really great.
You must be so proud of what you've done. What does the road look like for you?
I plan
What
on...
do you really want to get done?
I
mean, like,
really
yeah,
wanna
what do you
get
want to
done.
shake up?
You know, I would really like for us to look at how this impacts young people. I think that a lot of times we wait until adults are in our adult system of care to start dealing with these sort of issues that come up for them. I think we really need to engage beyond the mental health community and look into where people already are and where people are already getting their needs met and they're already getting their services. We didn't start faith communities looking at mental health. Faith communities were addressing mental health every day. And in lots of cases, I have to say, doing it very well. But in other cases, realized that there was a little more need for support. So I'd really like to engage the school systems around mental health and in children who are living with mental health issues in the classroom, and what that looks like and how they could be supported and really be set up for success. That would
It
be
was very
wonderful for me.
interesting that I was given the Mental Health Association's annual award, and
Congratulations.
I guess I came out. You know, a lot of people know by diagnosis. I love saying that word, diagnosis. But I actually called people to action and said, if any of you here, board of supervisors, department heads, any of you, if you're living with a mental health issue, you need to come out, because we need you to stand with us, because I know I hid that. I was afraid I'd lose my job. I was afraid people would think I was crazy, because, you know, that's the first word that gets called out. And one of the board of supervisors actually did, and said that, you know, she had never shared that with the community, and how glad she was that somebody made that call to action to say, step up. Because we know, you know, people in all economic strata, all across race, culture. I think mental illness is not just something that happens to poor people or homeless people. And more folks that, you know, are seen as power brokers in the community can be brave enough to come out and say that as part of their resume, because that's an experience that you have that you really deeply learn and grow from. That would really support our movement. Some last words from both of you. What about you, Amanda?
For me, I just want to say that I think for spirituality and mental illness, like you said, there are people that are ashamed to come out. And a lot of that is we're taught to be prideful, that if you admit you have a flaw, it means you're weak. Mm-hmm. So your pride knocks you down, keeps you hidden. The shame keeps you there. It doesn't let you get up. And where your beliefs come in is your beliefs takes that from you and says, hey, you know, shame comes from the fear of what people think of you. Don't worry about what they think of you, because I think you're beautiful. And so you're able to overcome. You're able to come out. And in doing that, even though your focus is on healing yourself, in healing yourself, you affect those around you. And so I think it's important, as you said, that for those who are in any position of authority or power, please step out of the darkness and help someone.
Beautifully said, and I completely agree. I think that it's really important that we do stand united, and that we will stand up when we see people being mistreated, when we hear people being mistreated, that we'll no longer laugh at jokes that completely dehumanize individuals, and that we really learn as a society to laugh at the appropriate things and to cry at the appropriate things. I think as a society we often laugh at what we should cry about, and we cry about what we should laugh about.
Yeah, I have grandkids, and I see, you know, how they're being raised, and I actually see that dynamic, that when they're being funny and maybe sometimes even like not very well mannered, everybody thinks it's cute. And so, you know, very early I think we need to have appropriate responses to appropriate issues that are coming up. Thank you very much, both of you. I love you. You know that. And I'm not going to forget this interview ever.
Either.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to BTV or BCM or Channel 28.
My experience with immigration is I've been married to my husband for going on 4 years now. He's from Nigeria, and some of my immediate family is Nigerian. I mean, we've been together for almost 5 years, but we've been married for close to 4 years now, and we've had a lot of problems. He couldn't get a job because he didn't have a work authorization, but now they require you to get everything all at once or whatever. It took us 3 years before he can get a green card, which meant we went through a lot of poverty. We had to rely on people to help us pay rent, find resources, because he ended up with high blood pressure, and then we had a hard time trying to find out where he can go to the hospital to get treatment. And on top of that, I have MS, and I have difficulty with jobs. I mean, I've tried to do jobs as long as I could with the MS symptoms that I have until they started getting worse, and I had to stop working. And then I found that I was unemployed, trying to apply for benefits. All of these challenges left us with the decision to where we had to stay in separate states, where I had to go into a shelter while waiting to get disability benefits in order, you know, to have some kind of income, and he had to stay in Rhode Island because he has family or people that can help him out until he can get a job that pays enough to where we can be able to pay rent and, you know, just to live. And there's not a lot of jobs that you can get when you don't have experience, so it's going to be really hard from the start, because it's going to be like he's just starting, and he's 65 years old, so that's going to be another challenge. So poverty to me is disability with immigration on top of that. It's just really been a big challenge.
Okay, my name is, I already said my name is Lynn, but I was born and raised here in Oakland. I'm a native, 55 years old. And how I came to where I am today is because the landlord had bought the building, and she increased my rent, the first piece of paper when she came in, with no identity, no deed of trust, no last landlord, nothing, just saying that she was the new landlady and she wanted her money. And she had bought the building October the 29th, and I think it was about November the 5th or 6th, but she demanded money for the last month. Anyway, I went through the stabilization board and called to find out if she's the landlord, and come to find out that she was. So I already knew that it was illegal for her to do it. We were under rent control in Berkeley, and that's where I was living. And we went to court, and she had to pay me to move, but I wanted to move anyway because I had been there 8 years, but the last couple of years I was diagnosed with rheumatism, arthritis, and the building was so old. I was staying on the 3rd flight of stairs where I couldn't go up and down the stairs, but I didn't have money to move. So I settled for a little bit of money just to move where I can get into another place, but I knew I was eligible for emergency housing with a 14-year-old son in school. I was disabled, plus a senior, 55. And I thought that I would be able to get housing quicker. And I said when I came out, I had been paying my whole Social Security check, which is $822, and the rent was $750, which left me nothing of my money. So I thought I was going to come out and get emergency housing quick. And I didn't mind because I thought I was going to get subsidized housing or some kind of affordable housing, disability housing or something. But I've been stuck out here for almost a year now, where I found when I came out, I started staying in hotels, waiting on the programs to call, and I joined all the programs like Center Independent Living, the Women's Drop-In, the Berkeley Drop-In, just different organizations. Started going to all the housing meetings and found myself stuck out here because it's hard to get a shelter with a boy that's 14, because they usually stop at 11 or 12. The lucky thing, when I got the little change, I bought me an automobile, because when I was going to court, I didn't even have transportation money to get to court or, to do my paperwork. Plus, I can't walk hardly. I'm crippled with the cane and the walker. And I had to go in Barton bus with no money and ask the bus drivers and stuff, can I please just get on, because I had appointments to meet, and if I didn't, I would lose my case. So when God gave me money, he said, buy me a little automobile from $700 to $800, which I thought I was going to get a car that was smoking. But somebody bought me a car for $700 to $800 to finish my housing part of what I had just finished. And so when I got to the car, I guess God knows best. I didn't know it was going to be my shelter, my storage place, my housing for me and my son. I had to eat in my car. My son went without baths and had to go to school for 7 months because we couldn't get into no shelter. And all the waiting lists are so long, and I'm still here even almost 12 months later. Going back to programming, I'm utilizing my time right now because I'm in computer classes to learn how the internet, where I can research, taking social justice to learn to have a voice and have my voice heard, you know, and have somebody to help fight for what I'm trying to fight for, and that's just to get me and my son back home. And but I can live my little old age like I'm supposed to live, you know, and not forced to do things that I don't want to do.
My name's Rebecca Washam. I'm 30 years old. I have 3 kids. My son is 6. I have 2 girls, 4 and 3. We came here in May of 2010. I fled domestic violence from my kid's father. He had kidnapped us and took us out of state to Oregon, so my family brought us back, and then we ended up here at the shelter to get away from him, get restraining order, and hopefully get my life back together. So been here about 1.5 years. I started working here about 3 months after I moved here. I work here at the Children's Center, so I see all the mothers, kids, and children that come into this shelter, as well as everybody else. I have come a long way since I got here. Since I started working, I do receive CalWorks for me and all 3 of my kids, but they cut Medi-Cal, dental, vision. They also cut my money. I started out with $828 and $564 in food stamps. Now, about a year later, I'm down to $413 and $393 in food stamps with living here at the shelter. I pay 30% of my income to rent here, so that is a plus, but on CalWorks, moving out of here, I will not be able to afford anything. Me and my kids will probably end up homeless again because the waiting lists are so long. I have kids are growing at a rapid pace. They need stuff, like everything. I mean, they keep cutting medical, so they want mothers or parents who are on CalWorks to get jobs, but they want to cut the means for the parents to have a babysitter so they can go to work and get off CalWorks. I don't understand because, like, the president's saying, you know, the people that make millions of dollars should be the ones having to pay more taxes because by all means they can afford it. We are living on basically nothing. We're at a shelter. We live on donations, food donations, clothes donations. They have a homeless healthcare van that comes by to help us. So without these things, I don't know where any of us would be. We come here to fix our life to the program, which the program is a tremendous help to me and everybody else who comes here and wants to change and better their life. But by all the cuts they're making it extremely hard. So I don't know where the mothers or the kids will end up being. They're not going to have anything. I mean, it's just going to, it breaks my heart. And watching the kids come in and they go from having nothing to nothing even more.